Hello and welcome back. I want to talk today about GMOs. These are an acronym I'm sure you've seen in different places. It stands for genetically modified organisms. And it's in the news sometimes, at least the news that I pay attention to. Maybe you're not so keen on GMOs. And here is a picture of kind of what one aspect of genetically modified organisms. Sorry for the blurriness of the photo. When I blew it up, it kind of got grainy on me, but I think it's readable. So you have the irregular tomatoes, or tomatoes, depending upon how you say it. And you have 10 days, 20 days, 45 days, and you can see that they're kind of moldy and gross after 45 days. And then starting in this last column, the genetically modified tomatoes, or tomatoes, after 10, 20, or even 45 days, they're looking very sharp. And looking at this, it almost looks like maybe they just copied and pasted these tomatoes, which I hope they didn't. But when you find things on the internet, who knows? But genetically modified organisms, in particular, I want to focus on food products. You'll see, the debate GMOs versus non-GMOs. And let's start first with just kind of a short video, 3-minute video on kind of different definitions of GMOs and terms you'll see. It's from a video from Scientific America, a couple years old, but it's pretty good.
In the last several years, we've seen some strange genetically modified organisms. Pigs that glow in the dark, chickens that grow without feathers, and even goats that produce spider silk proteins. But what really gets people riled up are genetically modified foods. The prospect of eating somebody's science project turns the stomach of those who aspire to eat so-called whole or natural foods. But what exactly does genetically modified mean anyways? And how are those foods created? To answer these questions, we need to go back in time about 10,000 years. That's when people first started domesticating animals and cultivating plants for food. By picking organisms with desirable traits and mating them together over and over again, people were able to mold species to meet their dietary needs. The classic example is corn, which started out as a tropical grass called teosinte, with small, nearly inedible kernels. Over thousands of years, ancient farmers in Mexico transformed the grass into the delicious, starchy treat we like to eat today. We now know those ancient farmers were manipulating the DNA of the teosinte plant. As few as 5 changes to its genome, the long strands of DNA that encode for proteins, create the dramatic differences we see between teosinte and corn. Scientists call this process artificial selection, and it's made all kinds of unappetizing plants edible, from wheat to rice to almonds and bananas. What's different about modern genetically modified foods is the speed and precision with which we can make changes. Now, instead of selectively breeding for traits, we can go directly to the DNA responsible, snip it out, and transplant it into newly developing plants and animals. If these snippets come from the same species, scientists call the new organism cisgenic. Cis means the same. But if the DNA comes from a completely different plant or animal, scientists call the new organism transgenic. Trans means to cross. Those fluorescent pigs, they glow green because they contain a gene from a luminescent jellyfish. And in the last 20 years, we've begun to see the food equivalent. Corn that makes bacterial toxins poisonous to pests, tomatoes that make the antifreeze proteins from fish, and even cows that produce human milk. So you may be wondering if this kind of overt manipulation is safe. Well, all of the GM foods currently on the market have been thoroughly tested, but the verdict's still out on some of the more exotic transgenic pairings. Personally, I'm waiting for a tomato that I can cut in the dark. For Scientific American's Instant Egghead, I'm Eric Olson.
All right, I want to now talk about definition, just a standard definition for genetically modified organisms. And I read an article a number of years ago that tried to define a specific definition for what a GMO is and kind of went through different possible definitions and explaining what was wrong or lacking in each of these definitions. And I couldn't find the article, but it had more than these, but I found something similar. So some places will define it, GMO, as just when you move one gene from one species to another species, right? When he was mentioning these transgenic organisms. Well, that is going to leave out a lot of the, what we talked about before, these CRISPR animals, that you're just modifying the genes through gene editing technology. So let's leave those out. So that's too specific. Here we have one that is a little bit broad. Anything that doesn't occur naturally, right? Nature doesn't make it. That's going to fall into some. I think many people kind of look at this as you're defining GMO, and you hear this definition, you immediately think of something that's like Frankenstein or whatnot. But this is going to leave out things like grafted plants. A lot of fruits are in trees, like orchards. They use grafting, where they take one branch of one tree and they put it on another tree. So a lot of this selective artificial selection from the video where you mentioned early on in the video, that's going to take out anything there. Like corn would then be a GMO, because of what we've done with the genes throughout the years. And I'm not even talking about the ones that were actually edited, but the just naturally what we would have found in corn before they had modified it from the harder seeds. And another one that I think is kind of split with the middle one is genes modified by gene modification by humans. This leads to a problem too, because again, there's a picture here of, this is a carrot, purple carrot, and again, if we go back to artificial selection, we have, carrots are mainly orange now, but we've bred kind of the purple out of it. Story back, I think, Europe years ago about King Orange and carrots. You can look up; it's kind of interesting. But all three of these attempt to define it, but don't quite define everything. I don't think everybody would agree with these definitions. So I think one of the things with GMOs and the debate on GMOs, you've got to first define your term, and if you read an article or see a news story, kind of try to get at what they see as a GMO. What are they talking about? And the last thing I want to look at today is just the many different crops that are grown in the United States that are GMO or used in GMO. Is defined by GMOs. So you have most of their sugar that is produced in the United States consumed is from sugar beet, which is your granule sugar, and that has been approved. And I think here it says 99.9% of all sugar beets have it, and it is, again, it's an herbicide, resistant herbicide. So most of these plants that are grown are going to be made so that when farmers use their the poisons to kill insects or other weeds, they don't actually affect the sugar beet or the plant. Your vegetable oil is mainly canola oil. Again, that's an herbicide, I believe, and it's can be, some of it is GMO. Corn, as I mentioned before in that video, can produce a protein that will basically kill bacteria that can grow on it. And insects, produces that protein that kills the insects. Potatoes, summer squash, which is the first one. It's not growing too much. It was the first one that was grown. Soybean, which is one of the largest products produced in the United States, actually the soybean. And soybean products are found in many foods. So you can see it's an emulsifier, different proteins, soybean oil. These are food for animals, and then we would consume it. So even then, it opens up the question, well, if you have a GMO soybean and then an animal eats that soybean, is that then a GMO? That beef GMO food? Who knows? Then with cotton, alfalfa, apples. Boy, I'm having trouble talking today. This is a more recent one where they've will stop the browning of apples. I mean, if you eat an apple and you set it down on the table for a few minutes, you come back, it's a little brown. You're like, oh, it's gross. It's bad. Still good. It has to do with the reaction of oxygen and an enzyme it has. And it turns brown. And they've developed now a apple that doesn't turn brown. And then there are some, like this papaya, that was being destroyed by, I think it was a fungus, by some sort of parasite, some sort of organism, and then they developed a one that was resistant to the virus. So those are the different types of products. And there are a lot of pros to these genetically modified crops. I'm in the pro GMO camp myself, because of the food, and it's easier to grow food, and more people are not going as hungry because we have these products that we can grow without being destroyed by insects or overgrown by weeds. And as far as the harmful effects, if we're dealing with just DNA, when you ingest something, if you're eating a genetically modified organism and it gets in you ingest it, your body will break up all those macromolecules and recycle them for your own use. They're not really affecting you. The only instance in which I could see something being effective to you would be if that product, the DNA, is making a specific protein. That's what DNA, remember, DNA to RNA to proteins. If that's making a protein, and that protein can cause you a harmful effect. But most proteins, when you ingest them, are going to be destroyed in the stomach by the stomach acid. But maybe, so I don't see much of a danger there. The danger is also in maybe you make the original organisms go extinct. They kind of outgrow and outdo the original organism, and that can be quite harmful too. So there are some things that you want to always proceed with caution and test these things. But as far as I see now, it looks pretty good and whatnot. Anyway, that's all for today. Enjoy.